Okay, in this short video, we are going to look at how to find factors of polynomials using synthetic division in order to get us down to the quadratic. Because once you get to a quadratic equation, you can use any of your quadratic factoring tips, tricks that you know from algebra in order to finish the result. But when we're talking about starting with higher level degrees, then you want to use synthetic division as the fastest way in order to determine if you have a zero. So, there's a couple ways or ideas behind how you are approaching. First, you could just simply randomly choose values for, say, your C term or the box term, hoping that one of them is going to give you a zero. Or you can use a graphing calculator to graph your graph and then use your zeros function to find potential zeros. Okay? The biggest thing you want to do, though, is once you find one value is actually a zero, you need to test it again. Some zeros are going to occur more than once. Okay? And so you need to know if that happens. So let's go ahead and look at this example. So in this example, it says I need to factor and then find the factors of the problem. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and graph it. Okay, so again, when you go to graph, remember, at least on my graphing calculator here, you're going to hit this function button, so the y equals button. It's going to open this screen. And you type your function in exactly as you see it. So we have negative x to the fourth, so you're going to use the negative, let me show it to you. You're going to use the negative button down here, so negative. You need to use your variable x, so that's this button here. The x is your variable. And I went to the fourth, so I'm going to hit the hat and 4. Now I need to arrow out of my power so I can move on. So this is going to be plus 2x to the third, move out, plus 3x, and I'm going to use my little square button here to make it easy on myself. And then I have minus a 4x and minus 4. Okay, so I got everything input. So once we do that, you've got everything input into it. One of the things that we're going to do is you want to go ahead and have a standard window. So before I go to graph, I'm going to come over here to zoom. And I'm going to hit zoom, and notice I've got all of these choices. And I'm going to come all the way down here to choice 6, which is zoom standard. So I'm going to start there. So you hit enter, and it's going to start graphing. So you're going to kind of give it a minute, and you're going to look and see what it does. And so you can see it's drawing me this little graph. And now you can blow it up if you want to. So notice it doesn't appear like I have anything in the positive y. So I'm going to go ahead and come into my window function. Oh, there's a big glare right there. Let me move this over a little. Alright, so you're going to come over here to this window function, and when you click it, it opens your windows. So one thing that we noticed is that we really didn't have any positive y's. So I'm going to go ahead and take that and shift that down. So I'm going to shift it down to 1. Actually, let's make it 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and graph it again. So notice my window has shifted, and now it's graphing. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that I really don't have a lot of x space. So again, if I want to make it bigger, you go back to window. And in my x, I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half. So let's go -5 down to 5 and go ahead and graph that again. So here now, notice I can see my graph a little bit clearer. Of course, you can play around with the window more if you want. But I do have a couple places here where it looks as though I'm touching at zeros. So I want to go ahead and I'm going to open up my calc menu. So notice over here on trace above it in blue says calc, Anything written in blue on this particular calculator, you're going to use this blue second button. So when you click that, what it does is it shifted you up to being able to use any of these blue terms. I want to use calc, so I'm going to hit trace, and it opens a whole list. Now I want zeros. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and then I'm going to hit enter. And notice it's asking me to set a left bound. So first and foremost, you need to locate where your cursor is blinking. So it's blinking right here. Let's start with the negative. So I'm going to use my left arrow, and I'm going to move my little blinking X cursor to the left hand side of that 0. And I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to move that cursor over to the right hand side and hit enter. And now it's asking me if I want to guess. So notice I have these two arrows here. They're pointing towards each other. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit enter a third time, and it's going to take a guess of what that 0 is going to be. So notice it's telling me x is -1. So what did this actually tell me? Well, this told me that I have a possible 0. Let's go ahead and write it on this side. So I have a possible 0 at x equaling -1. But now I need to look at the other one. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to go second calc. I'm going to come down to 0 and hit enter. Now I'm going to shift my little cursor to the other side. I want the left bound of my next, so that would be here. I'm going to go over my 0 and down a little bit and click enter. Enter to guess, and it's going to give me a second possible 0. Oops. Let me try that again here. So we're in the graph. And so here, second calc, again down to 0. So I've got my leftmost side, enter. I've got my rightmost side, and there it is giving me a possible 0. So it's telling me it's very close to 2, so 2 would be what I would test. Okay. Now that we've done that, you can actually put your calculator aside, because at the moment we don't need it. Now I have x to the 4th. So because this is to the 4th, this means I have to have 4 total zeros. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to use synthetic division. Okay, so I'm going to set it up. And the first 0 I'm going to go ahead and test is that -1, because it was pretty outstanding, whereas this 2 was a little bit of a decimal. So I'm going to go ahead and test -1, and again I'm going to pull my coefficients. So this was -1, 2, 3, -4, and -4. Drop that first one down, and then start on in. So I have -4, so, or -1, so bottom times the box puts underneath. So here I have -1 times -1 is 1. I have to add them. 2 plus 1 is going to give me 3. 3 times -1 is a -3. Again, we have to add them. 3 minus 3 is 0. 0 times -1 is 0. Add them. Gives me a -4. -4 times -1 is a 4. Add them. Gives me a 0. Now, this was what I wanted. I wanted my remainder column to become a 0. And so in this instance, what that tells us is that we know we have x equaling -1 is a 0. So this means the factor is going to give you x plus 1 as a result. Okay. Now, I have my new equation. So the easiest thing that we can do is you just simply drop in another box, and you want to test that same 0 again. Again, I need to drop down this first term. -1 drops, and now I can look at the remainder. -1 times -1 is 1. I need to add this. 3 plus 1 gives you 4. 4 times -1 is a -4. Add them. 0 plus -4 is a -4. -4 and -1 is a 4. I need to add them. I get a 0, and again, I got what I wanted. So what this tells me is that -1 works at least twice. So I know here at this range, again, I know that I have the factor x plus 1. And so now what I have to do is I have a choice. Okay, I started with x to the 4th. When we drop down to this row here, okay, so this row right here became the x cubed polynomial. I ran my synthetic again, which means this row here is now an x squared polynomial. Because I have an x squared, this is where you have a choice. Okay, so your choice is this. You can factor or reduce using quadratics. That's your first choice. Or you can continue with synthetic. Now, this was x to the 4th. I've already found 2. If I had to choose, the easier one is going to be to use your quadratic rules. So what do I have here? This is the x squared term. This is an x. This is your constant. So I have -x squared plus 4x minus 4. So I would go ahead, -x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 0. I would solve the quadratic by using any means necessary. So you can factor it using any factor rules. You could solve it using the quadratic formula. It's completely up to you. With this, the first thing I would do is get rid of this negative on my x squared term. So flip all my signs. So this becomes x squared minus a 4x plus a 4 equals 0. Now if we look at this, it actually factors fairly simply. X breaks into x and x. I need terms of 4 that give me -4. So this is going to be -2 and a -2. 1, 2 factors, 3, 4 factors. I only had a term of x to the 4th, so therefore I've done it. So in here I have my polynomial is going to be x plus 1, and it occurred twice, times x minus 2, which occurred twice. Okay. Now, most of the time, we want answers separately. So therefore, you would simply have to state that you had x plus 1 times x plus 1 times x minus 2 times x minus 2. And so that's what you needed to do in order to factor. And so here, this would be the factored form of your polynomial. Let's do one more for good measure here. Again, I have an x to the fourth. Again, the first thing that I want to do is I want to graph it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my calculator again. When you go back into your y, notice my previous equation is there. You can clear it out, or you could deselect it if you think you're going to graph it again. At this point, I would go ahead and clear it out, which means you can start fresh. So we're going to input this equation exactly as we have it. So we have x to the fourth minus 7x to the third. Oops. And that is why you need to be very careful that you remember to error out of your power. So let's try that again. Minus 7x to the third plus 9x. Okay, let's try this again. X to the fourth minus 7x to the third plus 9x squared plus 27x minus 54. See, that works better. And again, I would graph it. Now, yes, we're leaving the window kind of as is, but that's okay. And so now what you can do is you would come here, you could go to zoom. You can come down here to zoom standard, which is going to kind of pull your window back a little bit. And so if you look, you can see that we're still having a little bit of problem down here in the bottom. However, what I care the most about is going to be my x terms here. So there's a couple things you can do. First, if you want to see what it really looks like, you can come all the way down here to what's called zoom fit. When you do zoom fit, what that does is it's going to pull your graph way back in order to show you the actual graph all totally on your screen. Well, that's not going to be very helpful. So let's go into the window and let's go ahead and shrink things in a little bit. So we've got -5 to 5, but let's go ahead and make that y minimum -5 to 5 and graph that. So we're kind of shrinking that graph down. And we're not really sure what's going on here. So I would maybe consider shrinking it down some more. So maybe making this -2 to 2, which is going to pull it in even tighter. And so notice it's kind of looking like I just simply have a little curve there. Okay. So I've got this point over here, and I've got this point that's kind of looking like it's just got a curve. So first let's find this 0 right there. So again, we're going to go second calc down to 0. We want the leftmost bound. So we kind of need to find, notice let's see. Oops. Let's go ahead and go there. And let's go there and hit enter, and notice we're at x is -2. So again, we have possible is going to be that x is -2, and now we need to find the other one. So again, second calc, go down to 0. We're going to kind of come all the way over. See, there we go. So we've got the left-hand side, and we're going to come up to the right-hand side and click enter. And so it's guesstimating 3. Okay, so as painful as that was, we can now start our synthetic division. And we have 2 different zeros here that we can check as potential possibilities. So, first and foremost, we can decide which 0 you want to work with. Okay? Now, I'm pretty positive or pretty sure that this 2 is going to be a 0, but I'm curious to know what's happening at 3, so I would start with that. And again, pull your coefficients. So I have 1, -7, 9, 27, -54. Bring down your first term and get the party started. Alright, bottom times the box. So 1 times 3 is 3. I need to add them together. This is going to give me a -4. -4 times 3 is a -12. Add these together and I get -3. -3 and 3 is a -9. Add this together and I get 18. 18 and 3 gives me 54. Add this together and I get 0. Since that's what I wanted, what this tells me right here is that I have x minus 3 is a factor. Now, the other thing I know is that I started with an x to the 4th. When I bring it down, this leaves me with a x to the 3rd. Now with that, I can start myself a new box. And again, once you find a 0 that works, you test again because of the multiplicity idea. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this down again as a 1. And again, I'm going to get the party going. So again, 1 and 3 is going to give me 3. Add these together and I get -1. So -1 and 3 is going to give me a -3. Add these together and this gives me a -6. -6 and 3 is a -18. Add these together and I get 0. And look at that. I have another x minus 3 factor. Pretty cool. Now I started with x to the cubed, so this is really x squared. So again, you've got a choice. You can solve your quadratic or you could synthetic one more time. Now in the last one I solved the quadratic, but let's go ahead and show you what it looks like to synthetic one more time. Since 3 worked, again, I want to test it. The idea is you keep testing a 0 until it fails. So here, again, I'm going to drop down the 1. 1 and 3 is 3. Add these together and I get 2. 2 and 3 is 6. Add them together and I get 0. So I've dropped from x squared down to an x. Now, here's what some students end up doing, and this is okay. The rule says you keep testing a 0 till it fails. So we bring this down as a 1. 1 and 3 is 3. Add this together and I get 5. Notice this right here, 5 does not equal 0. Therefore, you would say the synthetic failed. So you would need to start again. Okay, so that's what it means when we say that it fails, is that this value right here is not 0. Okay, therefore it is not another 0, so therefore you have to go back. Now, what do we know about this equation here? This equation here is going to be x plus 2 equals 0. So, if I were to test my other 0, because I had that negative 2, let's see what happens. If I were to test that negative 2 that I'm not sure about, and I had 1 and 2 as my pieces, bring down the first term and go ahead and run your test. 1 and negative 2 is a negative 2. Add these together, you get a 0. This is just a constant, which means now x plus 2 is going to be a factor. Okay? So that is the way that it works. So here, in terms of my factors, you would have that your equation is going to be x minus 3, x minus 3, x minus 3, x plus 2. Again, if you wrote it with multiplicities, you would say that you had x minus 3 cubed and then an x plus 2. So there you have it. You have an example where when we got to the quadratic, we solved a quadratic to find the other two factors, and an example where we used synthetic division the whole way. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, enjoy, good luck, have fun, and I'll see you next time.